Hi, and welcome to another episode of Kuntarkis. My name is Michael Yon, and this is Planet Narkariss Part 6. I titled it Part 6 because we've actually done 5 parts about the planet Narkariss back in our history of this podcast. And they really are worth a listening because they have a wealth of information that Kuntarkis shared about the planet. And in this episode, there's some more, so this is really worth listening to. Kuntarkis, how did you come to learn so much about Narkariss? Was it through direct experience or passed down knowledge?
Okay, are you talking when I was actually on Narkariss, or are you talking when I'm in this human body?
I think to start off with you being on Earth, how do you know what you know about Narkariss and you being in Nakara?
Okay, what I've actually learned is, yes, we spoke about this yesterday, cellular memory. I have put a lot of time into connecting with my cellular memory. And back in 1988, I had the most unusual experience, which we also spoke about, where I sat within my own soul. And that's back in 1988. At that pivot point, I learned how to connect pretty fully with my cellular memory. And I brought different lifetimes when I was on Earth as well as a Nakaron. And that's how I discovered a lot of the Nakaron history. One of the other things, Michael, which a lot of people will question, but the reason people will question this, what I'm about to say, is because they don't know any other way of, say, bringing it into reality because of the high conditions that are placed upon people on this earth. We aren't taught about cellular memory. We're not taught that all our organs within us have actual memory characteristics that are stored throughout every lifetime. And as they're stored in our organs, they also are stored in our cellular memory, which is a very interesting factor. Our cellular memory will travel with us throughout every single lifetime because it's living energy. Now, what I'm about to say, what I discovered about myself, when I sit and I want to know something, I sit either with my legs I sit on my rear end with my legs apart, and I do a little bit of stretching, and then I take a few deep breaths, and then I just put my hands on my legs, and I say, I'm about to ask some questions that normally most would never. So I ask a question, and suddenly I see it like a picture or like a verbal expression. And I've been very, very fortunate to be able to do that. Sometimes it doesn't work, but pretty well 60% of the times it does. That's why I can do what I can do now with what I'm writing about the long gone past of over 13,000 years ago. And that has really triggered my awareness to my cellular memory. Now, that cellular memory goes back 13,331 years ago when all that took place on this earth. And that's the first incarnation that I had on this planet as Shang. And Kalusha, that's her first incarnation on this planet as Zheng Lai Wang. So that's really why, Michael, I now can do it. But let's go back a little further. Let's go back to the night that I arrived. When I opened my eyes and I wanted to go to the toilet, the nurse wouldn't allow it. I was very forward, more forward than I normally am. And I did. While I was in the toilet, just sitting, waiting to pee, I had suddenly a flash of coming into the body, but much older, like I was. And I looked at that and I said, Why would I have that? Here I am in hospital, and suddenly I had a flashback within probably only a couple of hours that it occurred, and I could see myself transferring into the body and the original recipient going out. So that's where it all began. But it only happened every so often. A lot of the time, I would experience it also in my dream state, but I would just let it go as a dream. And that was my, how would you say, my unawareness at that time. But as I moved on through the planet, my own evolution, I was running little seminars, and I was becoming more and more open, more and more expressive in what I was expressing. And what kept saying to me, believe in what you are saying. Believe in what you are saying. We are helping you. We are helping you. And the funny thing is, I believe now, and I'm going to ask Inika or Vimera, were you at that stage guiding me? So when I see them next, which is only a couple of nights away, that's the question I will actually ask them. And I get a really strong feeling that they were already guiding me many times through my life with different events. So I trust that answers your question about being on Earth. But now Narkariss, I got to go about Narkariss, because I had really unusual abilities that most people could never ever accept. I found that I could close my eyes and I could see beyond the past when I was in a Nakaron. I could even close my eyes and foretell through certain events that I could notice what would occur. And I found every single time those occurrences actually happened exactly the way I saw them. Even going back into the past, I could see the past exactly the way it was. And I believe what it is, or what it was my father, Yarkus Carter's energy. I had his energies, and it allowed me to see whatever I wanted to see. And that's why my magic was so, I suppose, not brilliant. I don't like the word brilliant. Interesting in all situations. Even when I went to planets and I said to Kanag, or I said to Kalusha, I want to go first and find out what is beyond what we see with our eyes. So I became invisible and I flew over, and I could see what was being prepared for our event. In other words, attacking us, surprisingly. And I watched. I also listened to what they were saying when I went down closer. And they were the enemy who were killing off most of the beings on that planet in one or two situations. I immediately came back and I explained to Kanag, and what we did what we call the triangle. We would go from a point that was facing, say, the massive forest, and we would open up to the left and open up to the right, and we would go right around the forest in another direction, both ways, and we would come behind them and come in, and they were totally unaware of that. So I used my abilities that my father placed within my genetics in so many different ways. It wasn't about creating a building where I could live, because we were given basically a penthouse each because of the things that we did. And we were commander generals. And we had an army. Massive, mate. 10 million each. Massive. It was incredible. So when you learn to believe in what you are, who you are, and even where you may be going in your own direction or your own evolution, You open up gateways within your cellular cells, and it draws out the knowledge to help guide you because you believe beyond all doubt. You're not living a logical existence. You're going beyond that with the mind. And basically, that's what it's all about.
Sure. And thank you. And the Nakarans themselves, they relate to our human history. Could you talk about the difference between how the Nakarans look now compared to us physically?
You mean their appearance?
Yeah.
Well, they've always been different. Um, the Nakaron stands 7 foot tall to 7 foot 4 inches. There are no Nakarons that are under 7 foot, which is quite incredible. The Nakarons, right throughout their 27 million years of evolution, have always been vegetarians, basically, right from the beginning. And consciously, they grew in their own evolution in that area. And I think that's one of the reasons why their genetics, when they form, like say a Nakaron woman becoming pregnant, every single child that is born ends up 7 foot to 7 foot 4. They end up quite robust, like in other words, streamlined, but very muscular. When I say muscular, I don't mean like Arnie, and you're like a big brick. They're slender, but they're tall. Their shoulders, if you look at the top section of their body, would be nearly 3 times the size of an average human, especially a male. And they stay like that, basically right throughout their entire life. And they can live up to anything to 450 years of human time because they don't believe in age. They never have. In fact, they never have. It's never been an issue with their way of thinking. So they live a healthy life. They live a strong life. They live a positive life. They also help other worlds, other people with knowledge. They eat the right foods. They think the right thoughts. Yes, they have emotion, but nothing like we do here on Earth. We change our physical structure when we start to go into our 20s, into our late 20s and early 30s. We start to change our shape. That is conditioning from our parents, but also it's what we eat. We are carnivores on this planet. 65% are still carnivores. And our body shape changes, where the Nakarons don't. They always have, like in their stomach appearance, always you'll see their abs and their body shape. You see their bottom of their ribs. They just look tall all the time, and they don't shrink. Like we here on Earth, our bodies shrink. We can be 6 foot tall. And when we reach 60, 65, and our body has suffered a lot of negative aspects in illnesses, we start to shrink. Our backs becomes like sloppy. We start to lean slightly forward. Even our knees start to bend a bit because our muscle structure starts to fail. And we don't have that strength that we had when we were in our 20s and 30s. That plays a very big part in our own evolution as humans. Now, I can't say human beings because that is incorrect. I would have to say that carnivores, it's human animals because human carnivores. We're the ones who are vegetarian and they change their whole aspect of thinking and way of life. They're human beings growing consciously because that's what they want. Nakarons, they always grow consciously because that's their whole evolution. And they pass on really good genetics onto their children, which gain the knowledge that they have learnt throughout their own evolution. And then they pass it on to their children. We here on Earth, which I know it sounds negative, But you're better off saying the negative things so people may wake up and realize what we're doing is wrong for future generations. We think on a different level, and that's one of the biggest issues. We think on a level of conditioning, on fears, on insecurities, on sexual things all the time. Women are attracted to men because of how they look, so it's sexual. There's no love in that. There's no love in sexual. Where the love comes from is the heart, and we have to learn to adapt a new way of feeling with our hearts, not our emotions. Most women who are attracted to a man is called karma and emotion. A Nakaron isn't attracted to a female Nakaron because they feel love. They suddenly are inspired by the essence of love. And in the relationship, Nakarons never divorce. There's no such thing. Absolutely no such thing. They may have their little disagreements, of course, everything. But they are not insecure like we are here, because we have turned our conditioning into now a belief system. And that belief system controls nearly every thought, every action of our existence.
What are some unique traditions or rituals that define the Nakarans?
Okay. One thing I find very interesting about the Nakarons, it doesn't matter if a Nakaron doesn't know you, like another Nakaron. If, say, for instance, there was a family in trouble, their house burnt down, any of the Nakarons in that area, even if they put out news that there is a family that needs a place to live, you would probably have 100,000 places where they were offering for those people to live with them until their house is fixed. That's how the Nakarons are. They also, how would you say? Oh, yeah. They also have mass gatherings of friendship and discussions, and they pass knowledge around all the time. They don't go to football games. They don't go to cricket games or golf games or things like that. They have their sports, but they have gatherings from all different areas on the Nakaron planet. And that's the most interesting factor. And they also have mass celebrations where they dance, where they tell jokes. They have somebody up on stage in all over Narkariss in different areas. And people come along with their children, and sometimes in these mass places where they have these mass halls, the children go into there and everything is set up for them to learn, to play, to have fun, while the parents can go and have fun. There's no pervertedness where, there's a pedophile or a homosexual looking at a child, they want to have sex with them. That doesn't exist, ever. That's an interesting point. Here on Earth, you can't trust any male. And I don't care what they say. From what I've seen and what I've researched, it's really scary. The amount of perversion that are within families. I have heard so many families have had situations where children have been molested by uncles, by brothers, by sisters. It's just incredible. None of that occurs on Narkariss. What we need here is to become more of a community where we gather together and just be friends. Have parties. We don't need alcohol. Nakarons don't have alcohol. They have Pasaki purple tea, but it's not an alcoholic drink. But it's a drink that it makes you feel so balanced. It enlightens you. It really gives you energy, and it's incredible. But it also puts you to a very peaceful situation. It's like, a stimulant in a way, but it's really nice.
And does Narkariss have seasons?
Seasons?
Mm.
They do have seasons, yes. Yes. They don't have the cold weather like we do. They don't have the hot weather like we do. But things change, like with flowers, trees. Trees become greener. Flowers begin to grow more and more. The interesting thing about the flowers on Narkariss, you know how a rose would be on a tree, probably say, look, I really don't know. I've never really discovered that, but I think it's probably about, say, 7 to 10 days or something like that, or maybe 15 days. I'm not sure. But a nice rose. On Narkariss, when the roses grow, they grow very slowly. And when they come out and bloom, they'll be around for 3 to 4 months. They won't fall. And at night, they all close up completely. Everything basically closes up. It's like it goes into hibernation. It likes it's going through its own self-rejuvenation. But everything here has a tendency to drop and rot. It's very different on Narkariss. The actual plants don't actually rot. What they do, they dissipate. It's like energy falling off a stem, and then something else will grow. It's a very different system, and it's a system that most people, even scientists, would not fully accept or understand. Because the Nakarons work with the planet, work with their nature on the planet out of living energy. And that's why there's a big difference. That's why they can foresee things, because they know that they are living energy and they have a consciousness that works perfectly through the mind. And they've learned only to go through the mind and allow their Nakaron brain to be their storage area, to draw on whenever they want. There's no ego to create confusion and also dissect everything that's actually sent from the mind to the brain like it is here on Earth.
In a logical way.
Yes, exactly.
What about the wildlife on the planet? What's that like?
Well, there's no carnivore animals on that planet whatsoever. There's no insects. There used to be when they first moved onto the planet, probably about 14 billion years ago. Sorry, 14 million years ago. I apologize. Million, not billion. Million. Because their evolution is 27 million. It was 13 million on their first planet, which was called also Narkariss. And when they had to move because of the aggressive alien race, they knew that they would lose thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of their own people. So they all evacuated. They knew they were coming. So, sorry, mate, what was that quick question?
It's about
again?
wildlife, because I know you've got big butterflies and small elephants. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. The butterflies are huge. They're like a bird. They are huge, and they got a big body too. But they can fly for days without even resting. They fly all over Narkariss all the time. And yes, they do. They're not insect eaters. They actually eat the actual, what's the stuff called inside flower? The nectar. They eat the nectar, and there is lots of it. There's lots of nectar. Now, there are animals that come into the forest where the Nakarons grow just like the muhas, where they have so much fruit. And there are vines that actually grow up trees, and they support the tree. They don't suck the life out of the tree. They actually support the tree. And what they do is they produce tremendous amounts of fruit. And in that fruit, even animals come and take that fruit. They're allowed to. Because the animals don't harm anything or anyone. They don't attack anyone. It's like they coexist together in peace. And they are very strange looking compared to planet Earth when it comes to vegetarian animals. There's no cows, but there is a creature that looks like an elephant, but it's only small. And it's really, really cute. And the funny thing is, it can fly.
How?
How?
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I can't answer that question because I've never investigated it. They seemed to be able to place energy around themselves and literally fly and move. There are birds that can glide for hours without flapping their wings. It's a very different conscious understanding to what Earth is. Everything on this planet is based on physical substances. No one knows, very few I should say, know about what living energy truly is. Where on Narkariss, every Narkaron knows what living energy is. From a young age of about 9, because, 9 on there would be like, say, 1 here, 1 or 2 for a child. But they know everything about living energy. And that's why they work with it right from a very young age. There are Narkarons today that are learning how to manifest and how to levitate with living energy. Not fly, levitate. And they do it. It's quite amazing to watch. We have parks that are so huge, and there's buildings all over those parks for people to come for holidays and things like that. And also in those parks, they hold events where if a Narkaron or several Narkarons or even 20 Narkarons create something spectacular that they can achieve, that they've worked on, Narkarons come along and observe them and sit and make a day of it. And they watch these ones literally levitate. Now, what they will do in time to come, I know this will happen, they'll be able to formulate that energy to move when they levitate. To this moment, they still haven't done it. No one has. But they can levitate very high, but they come back down again. They can also do somersaults, and they can do 3 or 4 or 5 somersaults without coming back to the ground when they levitate. It's quite fascinating to watch. They've gone far beyond what physics is on planet Earth. Even quantum physics is old news to Narkaron society. They believe just everything is possible, and they just keep trying and trying and trying, and they do it. What they create in say, hardware, dishes, plates, kitchen facilities, all that out of living energy and manifested into physical reality is absolutely mind-blowing. Like they do with their spaceships. They mold panels together through conscious thought. And that ship is so huge, it's impenetrable.
So is there no technology that they use to help them with the manifesting of what they're making?
Oh, they do, yes.
Yeah,
yes,
they have technology. Can you tell us about that? So basically, they're manifesting and making things, whatever they're making, but they do have technology that helps them manifest.
Yes. It's not that it's classed as old technology, right? But the technology is still used today in different, I suppose, let's call it factories, because that's the only thing I can really think, because that's where a lot of the technology is all over the planet. And that's the interesting part. They all seem to be interconnected. And they also send any new form of technology to all the different centers around Narkariss. So everyone is kept up to date. They also send it through computers. The computer systems there are like clear screens. They're living energy formulated into physical reality. When they put their hand on the screen, the energy of a Narkaron is transferred onto that screen, and they can communicate with any Narkaron over the entire planet. All they do is put their hand on the screen anywhere, normally on the bottom. You can see the energy formulating from the screen on the hand, and what happens, all they turn around is think of that being, and then suddenly that being appears. or it might beep several times in a color, and it will mean in 1 hour or 2 hours or 5 minutes or 2 seconds. They have a system worked out, and that's the interesting point. And they can communicate directly on that screen and have a big conversation. So the technology is very, very good. And as I said, manifestation, yes, they have massive machines that you can place objects within it, and you can press buttons, or you can just touch the little sensitive buttons, and what comes out at the other end is exactly what you put in. It can change the shape of anything. Doesn't matter what it is. And all their old stuff is all accumulated into different areas all over Narkariss. And what happens with those old objects that are no longer valuable, they're turned through a machine back into living energy, and the living energy is stored within these massive systems. And you can see them through these big, like, chambers, the energy that is moving around inside. And when they want the energy to manifest something, they extract it. And then they can put it through a machine and create exactly what they want. Everything is done with living energy. Everything is done through manifestation, through thought consciousness. And that, to me, is a very advanced society.
Including like powering their houses? Do they have a little box, or do they?
Every house has what they call a built-in monitor, and it's not connected to any outside source. And it's the house that is the living energy. And all you do is come in where a hand imprint is put, and it's not a specific imprint of any particular person, but your frequency, once you move into that home, you touch it, it automatically takes your frequency, which you might resonate at, say, 37,000 cycles per second, and it knows exactly who you are. And all you do is touch and say, lights on, please. And the whole ceiling, I say, wall lights, please, and the walls light up. A very illuminated light, as if you were still outside in the sun. So there's no effect to the eyes. There's no radiation of any description. It's all based on living energy.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing.
Yep. Oh, and their toilets, by the way.
Oh,
Let me
yes,
explain
yes,
this.
yes.
Yeah, their toilets, mate, are incredible. If you go onto the toilet and you have a pee-pee, right, there's no water in the bowl. And as soon as you pee, that pee is dissipated. The actual seat or toilet itself, the bowl that's part of the floor, shaped into the floor, that consciously knows that you're peeing or pooping. And as soon as you do it, it literally dissipates everything that goes into that bowl automatically. And it's as clean can be, and there's never any bacteria. One of the big reasons why there's no bacteria, which could be like a negative bacteria, like here on Earth, if you're a carnivore, there's no such thing as carnivores. And they're only a one race. They don't have diversity, like different civilizations living on the planet.
And they're very conscious of not having extra emotion on their planet, aren't they?
Yes. That's why they don't allow other civilizations to live on their planet. It's just never been allowed in 27 million years. And their culture is one of the most peaceful, most beautiful, most loving cultures you could ever see.
Yeah, would you just describe how, when they have visitors come across, they use technology to remove emotion?
Oh, yes. Yes, very interesting, actually. I know it's changed over the last, over the last probably several decades. But the one that I know is, if a culture, like, say, in other words, a spaceship from, say, the Ilias or another civilization that's been invited over, what actually happens is they get off the spaceship and they go straight through a chamber. and the chamber could be anything up to 40 foot long. And as they go through, there is what they call the frequency light system that passes directly through the body totally. And what it does, it's consciously programmed to remove all negative emotion of all description. It's stored within a vessel within that system with an identity of its genetics. It takes a photo of the being, and it's so quick. You just keep walking all the way through. You don't have to stop. And when you come out the other end, you feel happy, really happy. Even if you were aggressive, you suddenly feel really happy, and there's not a problem. Then there are beings like Narkarons at the other end to take you exactly where you're meant to go. But you're not allowed to, say, stay on the planet for anything longer than 3 nights. And you can only stay in certain places where it's been set up with the most comforting reality that you've ever seen. You have everything you want. You do go on bus tours, if you want to call it bus tours, and it's like what they call a hover. It's a hovercraft, and it's large like a bus, and they'll take you around wherever you want to go and show you the sights of Narkariss and also the people. You're allowed to go into special events and associate with Narkarons. When you go back through another machine that actually takes away any diversity of energy that may have stuck to your essence from Narkariss, the people. But then you're led back through the other one, and everything is placed back upon you before you walk out and enter your ship and leave. And that's created in one massive like dome where every ship comes into there. That is a culture from another world. The Charon ships don't. They go through another system where it goes through one of these most massive buildings you've ever seen. It is so massive, it's not funny. It's like looking at a school ground, and if you go up, say, 200, 300 feet, it is a building, like a dome-shaped building that covers the entire field of a football field, a massive football field. And within that, there is a system set up on both sides where it literally penetrates the hull and removes anything that is negative or anything that is a virus or anything like that. And it's dissolved automatically. They even do that with the visitor ships. If there's anything on the visitor ships, because where they bring the ships down, they're automatically looked upon. The energies go in and clean out the ships too. So there is nothing left there.
Because the Narkarons want balance. They want balance on the planet.
Absolutely, mate. That's why they put the 87,000 here in 928,000 years ago, because those Narkarons, they were just very different and they didn't want to change, but they were causing towards the end a lot more havoc, even though they had their own city. The Narkarons built them a city, but they put the walls up. The Narkarons supplied all the material and they put their own walls up right around their entire city. Those walls are now removed once they were placed here, and everything was cleansed. The team went in there by the thousands, cleansed everything out, dematerialized everything that was no longer wanted, and allowed for Narkarons to live there, normal Narkarons, and it became a beautiful city. So the system on Narkariss is similar to the system on the planet with the Muhars on. They have these massive jungles everywhere over the planet that produce all their foods. And they also, by the way, they eat their flowers. They have a system where they grow flowers to consume, and they take the flowers, the buds and everything. And so do a lot of people here on Earth. They take different flowers, which are created into herbs and things like that
Hmm.
for the nutrients, you know? Yeah. Well, it's just like I bought a kilo of roasted dandelion and chicory, and I having that as my coffee instead of having actual coffee.
Yeah. Oh, I wanted to ask you about the suns on Narkariss. Most people would think that there's just one sun. When did the second and third sun come in history, do you think?
Through consciousness, mate. See, the funny thing about evolution has no boundaries. It's limitless because living energy is limitless. We create the limitations through our own thoughts. And living energy knows that's where we are as a species. We're growing, and it may take 100,000 years or 100 million years or even 1,000,000,000,000 years to grow to a point where you can have 3 suns and no longer have night. The Narkarons have no night. When the Narkarons first moved on to the second planet, and they called it Narkariss, they only had one sun and they had a moon. Over hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years, the moon started to shrink, but not in reality. It was moving away from their planet. And about 4.5 million years in their evolution on that planet, suddenly the moon was so far away and another sun came into existence, closer and closer and closer, until it was a similar distance, still further away, but a similar distance to the first sun. About 11 million years. Sorry, no, that's wrong. No, sorry, hang on. About 8.9 million years later, the third sun came into existence and the moon was completely gone. The Narkarons now live with 3 suns and no moon. No one sleeps like we do here on Earth. We have to have sleep because if we don't, we will die and grow old very quickly because our body needs that time to heal. The Narkarons have like a fiesta like the Mexicans do. They all do it through the day. Many do it at the same time. Many do it as they choose to. But their whole, how would you say, evolution of growth comes from their thoughts and what they consume. The food they consume is never sprayed with anything because there's no insects. The thing we say we have to have insects to spread pollen and all that type of stuff, it's not true. It's because we think that way and we believe that's what it is because that's what we see. We don't go beyond what we see. On the planet Narkariss, they're all different in their thinking. So that's why they don't need to sleep anymore. But they have a rest time, 1 hour, 40 minutes. That's it. And they might do that twice through that 24-hour cycle, but they don't have time factor.
And they're all conscious, like, and able to leave their body and have adventures while they rest?
Now, 100%. All the Narkarons can do that because they have evolved over the last 14 million years on that planet. That's 13 million years more in evolution than us. So of course they're going to have all that technology. Of course they're all going to be vegetarians. Of course they're going to be spiritual in their own self-awareness. Of course they're going to be able to levitate because they practice. They believe. We here don't believe because we've never been taught to believe. And that's what we've got to change. And of course, evolution is going to be a long time with humanity. But I tell you one thing, we are very similar to Narkarons in our thinking. I'll tell you the reason why. Every single human on this planet, be it Asian, Westerner, African, European, We all have a percentage of Narkaron blood, Narkaron DNA, because of the 87,000 that were placed here 928,000 years ago. They evolved with Neanderthals. And here we are today, 928,000 years later.
You mentioned at the start about Yarkis Cardis. What role did he have in the shaping of Narkariss? Who was he to them?
He was like a god. They looked upon him like a god, and he would smile at them and say, please, please, I am no god. I am just me, Yarkis Cardis. Yes, I have abilities, but I have spent a long, long time formulating those abilities to help beings like you. But he spent thousands of years amongst the Narkarons, secretly, and then stepping out and speaking up. And over a long period of time, they started to trust him because they began to realize that he was not just a Narkaron. He was more. And eventually one day, he showed himself up on a platform to over 1 million, which were broadcasted over the entire planet. And they were just flabbergasted. They'd never come across anyone that was that 12 foot tall, looked like they were transparent, and they had all these magical powers. No one ever knew. But the Narkarons were the first to find that out. And that was the most interesting factor.
And also, the Narkarons deserved it, didn't they? Like, he chose the Narkarons for this reason.
Yes, he chose the Narkarons because he saw their spiritual growth. He saw their self-awareness. He could see that they were working with nature, and they understood totality when it came to living energy. He saw their past. He would wave his hand in front and create one massive screen that showed the entire past, and he could formulate that past into his essence when he was there. And when he left, he could view it. And he was so impressed that he kept coming back, and he kept talking to them, giving them knowledge, more understanding. And they're the type of society that are always intrigued by new knowledge. So he became a symbol to the Narkaron society on the entire planet. Everyone had respect for him 100%. And the funny things about the Narkarons, they don't talk negatively behind your back. They never have, because of themselves being spiritual. To be spiritual, you do not mock. To be spiritual, you do not kill. To be spiritual, you do not rape. To be spiritual, you do not talk behind one's back. All you do is love and allow yourself to understand. And that's the thing. Here, it's very different because we live in fear, my friend. We live in fear. And we've got to break that cycle of fear.
And do you want to briefly describe this one, Yarkis Cardis, how he came to have create 4 beings of his own, and how you came to be?
Yeah. After many, several small thousand years later on, in fact, a long time, Yarkis Cardis was sitting and thinking about the entire process. And he was in a galaxy where he was just resting because it was on his mind. And he thought it would be a really good idea to create one essence of himself. And then he said, no, 4 essences. I will create 4 essences of myself, and I will place them upon Narkariss in certain particular families of the Narkaron species for their own spiritual growth. And that's what he did. He literally released energy from his own being. And these 4 energies were given a soul. and they were taken and they were adapted within certain families. And those families had them each time they also chose to incarnate. So the energy would be identical and the growth would be more balanced in more ways. And that's what he did. And what he called, the first one was Kanag. The second one, Kalusha. The third one, Kuntarkis. The fourth one, Narkariss. He gave them names, and those names were carried throughout every single lifetime. It's the way the Narkarons are. It's their system, but also it's his system. And he watched with such love in his heart when they were born. He was made honorary grandfather to the children that were born through those Narkarons. And every time one of those children were born into a new lifetime, he was there every single time. And he would nurse them, and he would put the energy of protection within every one of them all the time. And he watched them grow. And then he also, at the beginning, he gave them each an ability so they would learn and understand. And that ability would grow and grow and grow. And they helped the Narkaron race become the guardians of the universe, or universes. And that's the interesting factor.
This concludes another episode of Kuntarkis. I just want to remind you that there is much more information, great depth of information to be found in Planet Narkariss Part 1 all the way up to Part 5. You'll find that in the history of our podcast. Absolute great amount of information there if you'd like to know more about the Narkarons and the Planet Narkariss. If you'd like to find out more about Kuntarkis, find his website, which is etcconsciousness.com. He has articles there, he has his books listed there, and also if you have any reason to contact us in general for any reason, just email kuntarkis@gmail.com. That's it for now. Thanks so much for listening. My name is Michael Yon, and stay tuned for more.